This is Chapter 8, Human Population. This case study is about China's one-child policy that it enacted in 1979, and then it recently enacted a two-child policy in 2015. But it initially enacted the one-child policy because it was looking at a huge population that was still rapidly growing, and they were worried that there would not be enough food or enough jobs for the whole population. And they enforced this by rewards and punishments. So at the time that China enacted this policy, much of the world was not happy about it. They looked at it as a human rights violation, or it was unethical for government to make this type of decision over its people. But China has also prevented mass starvation and mass famine. So there are two sides to the story. And in environmental science, there usually is. There's always going to be gray area, and nothing is totally good or totally bad. So you're going to see that theme a lot. And so some of the positives for this policy were that they were able to feed all of their people. And because it was a smaller population, that means less environmental damage. And they were able to provide enough jobs to everybody. And some serious negatives were that China has a preference for males, and that's cultural. And so because they can only have one child, if they had a baby girl, some people would kill or abandon these baby girls and then try again for a male. So that was a major negative. And because of that, there ended up being more males than females in the population, and it was a very prominent. And so males have have a harder time finding a partner for marriage. And another negative was that there were not enough young people to support the elderly in terms of Social Security and providing health care. And this is an issue that's also prevalent in other countries that have shrinking populations like the US, Japan, and other European countries. But there's not enough young people that are working, and that money isn't being taken out of their paychecks to put into like Medicare or Social Security to support for the elderly. And so on page 187, know these graphs and captions. This first graph is demonstrating that India will soon surpass China, and they will have a higher population. Their growth rate is higher because China enacted the one-child policy, but India will soon surpass them. And India has a lot of issues because of this. And this figure down here is the world's population, which is 7.3 billion today, but it is a exponential growth rate. And so it's following that J curve. And so a couple of reasons why our population has grown so rapidly is because the rise of agriculture, and then because of the Industrial Revolution. That caused this spike here in the last 200 years because we have better sanitation, medicine, food. This blimp right here is the Black Death, right about here, the dip. On 188, you should know that Sub-Saharan Africa has the highest population growth rate. So they are growing the fastest, and never just write Africa, always write Sub-Saharan Africa, because the countries up here, Morocco, Libya, they don't have a high growth rate. But in Sub-Saharan Africa, they do. So know that the current world growth rate is 1.2%, and that doesn't seem like much, but that means that it's going to double. The human population is going to double in 58 years, and that's exponential growth. No infant mortality rate, which is right here, and then this guy right here, Thomas Malthus, and his Malthusian theory. So he said that he crunched some numbers, and he found that our human population will grow exponentially, and it will surpass the food supply. So it will lead to mass starvation, to famine, to disease. So it kind of has scared a lot of people, but he said we need to do something to do something about our population so that this doesn't happen. So that's very important to know right here, that we're going to surpass basically our carrying capacity, and we're going to overshoot, and we're not going to have enough resources. So he predicted that. It hasn't happened yet. We have surpassed our carrying capacity, but we have raised our carrying capacity because we're able to grow more food than we would have before in his time because of innovation and ingenuity. No IPAT. So IPAT says predicts a country's total impact on the environment based on population, affluence, which is how rich we are or wealthy we are, and then technology. So the United States has a high IPAT because we have high levels of all of these things. Even compared to China, China has a high population, but we have we're higher in A and T. So we're turning over to page 192. You need to know the top five most populous nations in order. So make sure you know this. It's also in this chart right here. And know down here that Southeast Asia, which is India, Pakistan, Nepal, these countries right here are Southeast Asia, as well as China and these countries down here. They have the highest population density. So make sure also you know it's Southeast Asia, which is right here, because other countries in Asia don't have a high population density. So on page 193, these are age structure diagrams. And so these are very, very important to know and to be able to read. And there are three shown here. This kind of looks like a triangle, and this is showing a population that is increasing rapidly. This one that has kind of straight edges is a stable population, and then there are not large lines here, and that's a population that is decreasing. So there are these three colors, and they represent different age groups. So these down here are pre-reproductive, so 0 to 14 age. Orange is reproductive age, and then yellow is post-reproductive. So the ages are important because the more people you have in the pre-reproductive stage, they will determine how a population is increasing. So there's the highest number in pre-reproductive here, so that population is increasing, lowest here, so it's decreasing. Post-reproductive, reproductive are also important, and I'll show you in these graphs down here. Canada and US, so they have right here in their post-reproductive stage, they have this increase, and that is the post-World War II baby boom. So many of the soldiers came back from World War II, back to their families, and they had a lot of kids. So that represents that. And then this is Nigeria. Nigeria has a rapidly growing population, and Nigeria is in sub-Saharan Africa. And so Canada, US have this baby boom, but they also have, but also countries in Europe, and other countries like Japan have this baby boom as well. And so those are called graying populations, and that means that most of the population, or a large percentage of the population, is going to be reaching their older years, are going to be elderly. And so there's going to be less workers to support the old folks, and that's going to mean that we're going to need more health care. So that is a concern. That is a big concern. We're going to go over, and those are countries like the US, Canada, Japan. China has also this is China right here. China has this is the baby boom, and these are the children that were born after the one-child policy. Sorry, I'm back on 194. But as you can see, their population was rapidly growing, and now, or it projected, it's going to be shrinking population. And so they're going to need to figure out how to support these elderly people. So on page 196, total fertility rate. I'm actually going to continue this on the next video.